welcome back. Now I'd like to introduce our next distinguished guest. She's from Jordan Hashemite University, Professor of Molecular Cell Biology, Rana Dajani. Also, she's author of the book named Five Scarves, Doing the Impossible. If we can reverse cell fate, why can't we redefine success? Professor Dajani will give her speech on changing roles of women and mother. And Professor Dajani, we will also have time for Q&A, but first, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Wherever you are in the world, I'm really excited to be part of this conference and to meet all these amazing people. And I'm here to learn as much as you are. So please write those questions, share those comments, those critiques, because that's how we all grow together. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. There we go. So when I start usually my talks, I'm a biologist. I imagine that in the past, when human beings were evolving, there were actually two groups of people. There were a group of people who sat around a fire and told stories, and there was another group of people who looked at them and said, you're wasting your time. But you can imagine which group of people actually survived. It was the storytellers. So in the spirit of storytelling and the importance of that for our survival, I'm going to share a number of stories because I'm pretty well known for being a good storyteller. And I'd like to introduce myself, in addition to the lovely introduction by Sumaya, is that I do many things in my life, and I play many roles. And in English, you say you play a role, you wear a hat. But I don't wear a hat, I wear a scarf. So I talk about my 5 roles as my 5 scarves. And the first scarf that I wear is, to me, the most important one, is that I'm a mother. Because nobody can replace me in that role. I'm the most important one, and it's about bringing up the next generation, which is the most important thing I can give to humanity. The second role is that I'm a teacher, an educator. I was a school teacher for 10 years, and then I became a professor at the university where I also teach. And I think the second most important role we can give our students and the future generation is when we nourish and teach inside the classroom, because our children, if they're not spending their time at home, they're spending it in the classroom. So my all humbleness and pride and gratitude to our teachers all over the world. My third scarf is that I'm a scientist. I work on 2 fields. So we work on the impact of trauma and war on physiology and on your DNA, which we call epigenetics. And we try to understand if this impact of trauma can actually be transferred across generations, and can it have a positive impact, not just a negative impact. The second field of expertise as a scientist is I study ethnic populations such as the Circassians and the Chechens, and we study in particular diabetes, and we have been able to discover a novel genetic risk factor for that. And of course, this led me, though I'm a scientist, to actually work in bridging science and law and policy. So we created the first law in Jordan to govern and guide stem cell research and therapy. So sometimes your role doesn't stay within your lab and your classroom. You actually have to step out and take responsibility to enable change around you. My fourth scarf is that I'm a social entrepreneur, and I started a program called We Love Reading to change mindsets through reading to create change makers, both in children and adults and the community. And you can learn more about that by just following We Love Reading. Now, the fifth scarf is something that I actually did not choose. I was chosen as one of the most influential female scientists in the Islamic world a few years ago. And each one of us, they had given us a title. And I was given the title of the Islamic feminist. And I thought, oh, no, you can't say that, right? Because when you say feminist, everybody thinks, what is feminist this? What's about? And when you say Islamic, also the people say, what is this about? So I was kind of in the middle, and I emailed them and I said, could you change this? And they said, no, this is, you write about women in science and you're a woman scientist. And I thought, okay, many times we get labeled. People, put us in boxes and stereotypes. So I thought, I'm going to embark on a journey of discovery to redefine what Islamic feminist means to me, on my own terms, on my own rules, and share that with the world. And that's what I did. And the result was writing my book, Five Scarves. It's now in English and in Arabic, and we would love somebody to translate it into Turkish as well. It was reviewed in Nature. So I'm going to share with you the story behind writing this book and how I reached the conclusions that I did in this book. And it led me to ask the question of how can we reimagine success? And as a scientist, I approach this challenge as any scientist or even a human being. It's seeing what everybody sees, but thinking what no one has thought, which is thinking outside the box, right? Nature hasn't changed, but every time there's a new generation, there's a new person who can look at things in a slightly different way and come up with a new perspective and a new way of looking at things. So first, all around the world, we hear this rhetoric in the media and in politics and everywhere that there are not equal numbers of women in the workplace compared to men. And this is not just in science, but in law, in business, in politics, everywhere. So to me, to answer that question, how come we have less women, I looked around as a scientist and started asking questions. Now, the first response was that, it's because women are not educated enough. And people always quote this slide showing how women and men start out almost equal at school, but then as they go higher in education, and I'm talking about the STEM field, but this applies everywhere, you have less and less women. When I saw this graph, I thought, this is strange, because in Jordan and all over the Arab world and in Turkey as well, and in other countries like in India and others, actually we have a lot of girls in higher education, like bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD degree. So this slide is wrong. And I drew this red line to reflect the percentages of women in my part of the world. So for education to be the reason why we don't have women in the workplace doesn't work, because in our part of the world, we have enough women who are educated. But everywhere later, they drop off. So then, and this to me was a very important lesson, because if the West is struggling to get more women in STEM in education at university, maybe they can learn something from us, because we have a lot of women in education, in higher education, in STEM fields. And this is very important, because if we look at some data where it appears that the implicit attitudes towards women embarking in STEM fields does not correlate with the gender gap index, right? So there's something there that we are doing right, that the world and social science should, and those who are interested in STEM and women should, take notice of and come and study us, or we should study ourselves so we can understand what is it that we're doing right. So back to the drawing board. So if it's not education, then what is the reason we have less women in the workplace? Well, if we look again, we find that women leave the workplace when they start work. It's actually when they get married, or when they start having children, compared to men, right? So single women stay longer, and women without children stay longer. And so this led me to think, so maybe it's the workplace itself that's not friendly towards women who are married or women who have children. And so many companies around the world, and why is this? Because the framework of the workplace was designed by men for men, and even a particular kind of men, the white Western male, when the Industrial Revolution happened. And when women entered the workplace, they didn't say, wait a minute, we may be a little bit different, right? Why would we succumb to this same framework? And when I say different, they're different at least in one thing, that women have a uterus and are going to get pregnant and men aren't. And so you would think, at least in some stages of their life, their framework, how they look at work and what is success, could be slightly different than males. And of course, some males will tell me, no, we eventually biotechnology will also allow us to be pregnant. I say, okay, fine, when that happens, we'll discuss it. But meanwhile, it is women who get pregnant, and therefore they may have a slightly different definition of success at some stages in their life. But unfortunately, women did not stop and say, wait, change that framework. They tried to mold themselves to fit the framework, which is not right, because that way men and women are measured with the same stick. And it's like this cartoon where everybody, if successful, has to be able to climb a tree. A fish cannot climb a tree, but that doesn't mean a fish is not successful. And who is measuring, who's putting those rules? It's men, not every member of society and the different parts of society where women contribute to 50%. And even those who, this attitude of changing women to become more like men is continuing. So we see in Facebook and Apple where women are offered to freeze their eggs until they're after the age of 40. What does that tell you about not respecting the biology of women? And in just that one thing, that we have a uterus, which has nothing to do with social, religion, culture. This is evolutionary biology that we evolved as the members of the species to carry the fetus. So what happened? We found that many places, companies, created more friendly workplaces for women who are pregnant or have young children that they need to nurse. Because that's the second difference, right? We breastfeed our children, the men don't. And so this was introduced in many companies, and that's good, and we need more of that. However, it's not enough, because I was at the UN headquarters in Vienna last year, and we had a professor from mathematics who had a newborn child. There was no place in the whole building for her to go nurse her child, and she had to do it in the bathroom. So, something is wrong about respecting these biological differences that also contribute to bringing up the next generation that we need to be aware of. But this led me to ask that maybe it's not about the workplace, because even when the workplace is trying to offer all this, still women are not going into the workplace. So that led me to think maybe we're asking the wrong question, right? It's not about how to get more women into the workplace, because that assumes that we want to be in the workplace. We should ask women what they really want, right? How do women define success? And to me, that is innovation. It's by restructuring the question, by looking at the problem in a different way. And if we do that, we do this paradigm shift, what we realize, we will have a huge new way of looking at success that is as diverse as we are as humans. But we have to make sure that as we ask this question, to strike a balance between acknowledging the biological sexual differences, having a uterus and nursing children, and not using those differences as a basis for discrimination against women, because sometimes that happens. Bringing up children is not something trivial, and we should not push it under the carpet and consider it as not important. It should be front and central, because you're bringing up the next generation. And if both parents are not involved, both the father and the mother, the children will suffer, and the next generation will suffer, and humanity will suffer. And I'm just going to give you a small example. These are brain scans of children who have been neglected in terms of childcare. They have been fed, they have been sheltered, and they are healthy in terms of physiology, but they were not taken care of by a caring parent. They were just put in a bed and left alone. This was done in Romanian children, orphans in Romania, and were studied by a Harvard professor, Charles Nelson. And what he found is that the children with extreme neglect, meaning there's no communication between the adult, the caregiver, and the children, their brain is stunted, it does not develop properly, and this reflects on not just their mental capacity, but their social capacity as well. So the role of parents in bringing up the next generation is very, very important. So what I wanted to do is to go around the world and find out how different cultures perceive women and their role, and children, and the importance of children in society, to bring them up as a contribution to humanity. Because the rhetoric around the world is only coming from a hegemony, which is coming from the West, right? A Western way of looking at what is success, that is very male-centric. And so what I did is I started working with women in Bulgaria. And what we found with other scientists is that, and this is a story from an American scientist who went to Bulgaria to help women after the communism fell. And she had a plan to make women go to work, to free them from home. And so when she came with this mentality in her mind, the woman told her from Bulgaria, wait, under communism, we were forced to go to work. Now we want to have the freedom to stay at home. So she thought she was helping them, when actually she wasn't, because she did not understand what they wanted. And also similarly, in the Arab region, there was this guy who said, unfortunately, he was an Arab business guy, and he said, women in the Arab world will not succeed unless they stay till 12 o'clock at night at work, instead of going home at 5 to take care of their children. And I said, who Who said which is more important, right? Why should I follow a paradigm from another culture? And why shouldn't I respect the woman in my culture on what they want and what is their priority? Again, asking that question, what do women really want? Not what do men want or what does society want, but to trust them so they know what they want. And just to add to this, Jane Fonda, which I'm sure you all know, was visiting in a big conference for women at one point a few years ago, and she said, you know, Arab women and most women from the Eastern region, from the Middle East, have huge confidence in themselves. They're proud to be women. They're proud to be females and mothers. And this is something that she did not feel that the women from the West have, that they have to hide if they're pregnant. They can't show they want to take care of their kids because that doesn't appear to be serious. And this is women from MIT and Harvard. So apparently we women from the Middle East, we have something unique about how our society and our culture perceive us, which is very important. And so because of that, we see that the first university in the world was actually founded by a woman from Morocco, Fatima al-Fihri, in 859. This is the oldest university in the world. While in 1820, people in Britain were still discussing, do women have the right to education, or do women have a soul? Are they human? So what I want to do is embark on a journey, interview women from around the world, from different cultures, to learn how they are perceived, from Latin America, from the indigenous Indians, from Eastern Europe, from India, from China, from sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm using all this material to write a second book as a sequel to The Five Scarves. And what I envision and what I'm discovering is a beautiful kaleidoscope of how success is perceived around the world. Now, how do you actually use this information? How do you use this knowledge of this diversity to really have a place for women on the table? So first, we need to have gender by design, meaning we need to create laws where women are front and central. But it's not enough to do the laws, right? We also, because the people who apply the laws are a lot of times men, white men. So we need to also change the quota to make sure that there are more or equal women at the table when we are discussing implementing the laws. And lastly, even if we have women at the table, we need to make sure there are no power dynamics so that, only men are taking control of the table. Women have to be, outspoken, say their opinion, and be respected. So we're actually changing the frame shift, the whole framework of how the mindset, to change the framework of how we look at life and society. And it's not about women only, by the way. It's about diversity. There are many minority groups around the world in different ways, and we need to respect them all because they all count and they're all important going forward. So it could be, success could be taking care of my children at home. It could be, no, I want to be the CEO, or it could be anything in between. And this is what we want to respect. And we want to put a value, a monetary value, as part of our GDP when we calculate the hours that women spend taking care of children as very, very important for bringing the next generation. So, and that means we need to change our perspective of what we value. Leadership from the grassroots. And by the way you imagine success or define success for you doesn't have to be fixed. It can change with time. So this was a study done from MIT where they followed the male graduates and they saw that the red line, they went up and plateaued at 40. But for women, it was a zigzag that kept going up beyond 40. So this age limit of 40 years old, as that's it, and you don't succeed after that, is a male-centric ceiling. For women, that's when we finish our biological clock and having our children, and now we are excited and enthusiastic and full of energy and experience to give to the world going forward. So lastly, people talk about equality, assuming everyone benefits from the same support. And then it has evolved to equity, equal access achieved through necessary targeted support. And then it's now liberation. Let's remove all the supports because we want to address the causes of inequality. I want to add to that we need freedom. Who said we want to play that game to start with, right? And we must remember that we are privileged where we are today because there are many women And we need the men to be with us. And I hope there's more men in this audience as well as women so that they can be that change. And by the way, we have good men who do that, but we don't tell their story. Again, we need to tell their story so they become role models for other men to think, yeah, because many men like to do it, but they feel shy or, or what will people say? But when they learn about other people who are doing it, they get the courage and do it as well.
Thank you. And could you tell us about the effects of standardized success patterns on women? Standardized, success patterns of women.
Yes. So yeah, that's the whole talk, right? That these standardized success definitions are very male-centric and very Western, in the sense that, if by 40 you don't succeed, that means you won't be able to. So you have a lot of fellowships and awards and prizes tell you the age limit is 40. I said, but I'm a woman. Maybe I did my PhD and then got married and had my children. So by 40, I'm still starting my career. But nobody caters to that. So even the women prizes and women awards do the same thing. They put that limit at 40. So to change that, we have to be participatory. We have to have a voice. And we have to call for this change and say, no, you can't put 40. That's discriminatory against women. And we need to open it wide to include everybody at every stage in their life, wherever they are. So any challenge, so we need to challenge those status quo ourselves by being vocal.
And the last question is, what would you like to tell us on women, technology, and nature? We are human beings, right? We are part of nature, and that's amazing, and it's wonderful. So we need to engage with nature more to understand the world around us in a more hands-on way, right? We've been so much isolated in cities and in houses and technology, and we forget the nature outside. Take a walk, touch a tree, smell the earth. This is very important. But it also teaches us that technology can be helpful. Right? But the important thing is that we use it to serve us, not for it to control us. And the person who takes that decision is us, how we do with it. So I'll give a little example. At We Love Reading, what we did is we read to children in real time. We don't use technology, not an app, not a screen. We say, no, the parent, mother or father has to sit with the child, look in their eyes, read the story, smile. And this is amazing because the child loves that interaction. That's part of how we evolved. We are social creatures. But we use technology at We Love Reading in a way to connect the adults around the world, right? Because I read in Jordan, I can now talk to somebody in Argentina, somebody in Turkey, somebody in Malaysia, and we share our experiences, but we are adults. And that's okay. But we don't give it to the children because they need to still experience the human-human interaction. Thank you, Professor Dajani. As a young Muslim woman, I inspired a lot from your speech. And dear guests, our program will continue with education and entertainment panel. Thank you again and see you soon.
Thank you very much.